Today I'm not broadcasting from the ET Now studios, but I'm broadcasting from Radio Mirchi 98.3 FM, which is operated by ENIL or Entertainment Network India. And in conversation with me is the man himself, Prashant Pandey, the Managing Director and CEO. Well, for the first time, we're reversing roles. I'm coming into your office and not the other way. And a very cool setup. Very tempted to press some buttons over here.
Go right ahead.
I'll go right ahead. What if we, interrupt live programming? I'm not going to do that, but I am going to quiz you and question you about the business, about the sector, and lots more. And to begin with, Prashant, I know that the radio sector really went through a rough time during COVID, but now it looks like, stations across the board are really pulling up their socks and doing everything to reinvent and, in order to change the narrative. How tough was it during the COVID time?
Well, the first thing that you must realize is that amongst the media sectors, the worst affected was radio. And the reason for that is that close to 50-60% of our advertising revenues come from retail outlets, right? So while a big advertiser like Maruti may advertise out of Delhi, but it's their dealership in Mumbai or in Ahmedabad which actually puts a lot more of the ads. Now, when those dealerships were shut down, when the retail establishments were shut down, obviously our business took a big hit. And in the first year, in FY21, our revenues tanked by almost 80%. Wow. So you can imagine the stress it put, right? Now, there's a second reason why the radio industry was really badly hit. And that is that our cost structures are all fixed costs. There is very little variable cost. So if you're in the newspaper business, for instance, and if your circulation drops, then you save on newsprint cost because you're now using less newsprint. But no such thing in the radio business. All costs are fixed, right? Now, third thing, look at the license fees and all that we paid to government. One would expect that in times like this, the government would come to our rescue and say, okay, fine, we'll give you a little bit of a deferred license fee and all. No such luck. So the only variable costs that we could cut were, unfortunately, people cost and electricity and all that. And we did the best we could. But these were like really, really tough times.
So given that, the radio revenues, at least in CY20, went to almost half, close to 1,400 odd crore rupees, when do you see it going back to those, the FY20 levels or the 2019 levels?
So again, because the advertising is mostly retail, remember it's not just about when retail establishments open up and they start spending money. In the case of retail, they're very watchful about where they spend money, right? Unlike big brands who can always pass it off as brand building exercises, retail outlets want immediate return, right? Immediate bang for the buck. So all of CY21, they were like watching the scenario unfold. And even in periods of time when the COVID was receding, they were a little careful with their purse strings. In CY22, which is the current year, things have started to open up, right? And in the last 6 months, we have seen that the business has now started to come back to earlier days. The sentiment is certainly very bullish. The number of ads we are getting is even higher than we were getting in the 2019-20 period of time. So I would like to say that, I think the business is now back on its feet. And if not in CY22, I think by the end of CY23, we should have recovered all the lost ground.
By the end of CY23. Okay. So just to understand the overall, how the ad revenues work for a radio business, it's FCT, the free commercial time, right? And non-FCT revenue. So for you guys, how exactly does that work?
So first, let me explain that the FCT or what we call free commercial time, there's nothing free about it. It's just a legacy from the past. In the old Doordarshan days, it was just called free for whatever reason. So yes, there is basically advertising on air, right? Which is the normal inventory that a radio station offers to advertisers. And for most radio advertisers, that's like 90% or 95% of their revenue. In the case of ENIL, almost 15 years ago, we actually started thinking of different ways of generating revenue. And one of the products that we created then and which actually has got a lot of tailwind today is what we call the solutions business.
Yes.
Now, in the solutions business, look at what we're doing. We're actually going a step beyond merely offering ad inventory, right? Because when you offer ad inventory, then it's the advertiser's risk, because if they don't get returns, then too bad. But we have sold the inventory to them, right? Or we've sold the listenership to them. In solutions, we actually ask them, listen, what's the marketing challenge you have, right? And let's say if you are in the city of Indore and you have a challenge that I'm not getting business in the afternoons, and all my business comes in only in the evenings, then we will develop a solution for you which will try and get more footfalls into your store in the afternoons.
Got it.
Now, clearly that can't happen only with advertising, right? It can't happen only with radio advertising. So what we would do then is we would probably do some on-ground activation in neighborhood societies, or we would do a promotion which runs in your store in the afternoon, or we would do some digital campaign featuring some RJ of ours. So it's a bunch of products that we will use, including radio, of course, to get the results for you. So this is broadly the solution business.
Okay.
Now the solution business is growing very rapidly. And the reason is very simple. You see, economically when things are not very good, advertisers say that if I put money, can you work harder to give me results?
Yeah.
Right? Rather than just palming off your inventory to me. So the solution business basically does that. So for us, about 2/3 of our revenues is pure advertising,
right,
and 1/3 of our business comes from solutions. But really speaking, we would like to reverse that.
Yeah.
And I've said that in the past that hopefully in another couple of years' time, we should at least hit 50-50.
Okay. I want to talk about that and lots more, but why don't we step outside and go into your very cool office as well?
And noisy.
And noisy. Come.
तेरी दिवाली मेरी दिवाली इस बार की कच्चा दिवाली मनाएंगे।
So here we are in your buzzing, lively and very noisy office. Hopefully people will keep it down right now. But Prashant, lots more to talk about. And I wanted to understand the outlook on Mirchi Plus.
Yeah.
That's really the OTT platform for you guys. So what was the game plan? What was the thinking? How is it shaping up?
So Mirchi Plus is just the culmination of the digital strategy that Mirchi adopted 5-7 years ago. And for the earlier period of time, what we were doing is that we were producing a lot of digital content, right? And not just audio, but actually a hell of a lot of video producing, and we are producing entertainment shows and all of those kind of things, and all of that actually was being put on public platforms, right? So like we have a very, very strong presence on YouTube. We have almost 15.5 million subscribers on YouTube. We are a large MCN with 14 channels and all of those kind of things, billion plus views in a year, right? So it's like massive, the operation that we have. In fact, on YouTube alone, we gather more than 70 or 75 million viewers of the brand Mirchi, and actually the users...
So you guys need to post this interview.
Absolutely, we will do that. And actually look at this, that the actual radio consumers were probably less than that, right? So we always had a strong digital presence, but it was on public platform. Now eventually what happens is that it is always better to own the viewer or own the user of your product. And that's not really possible on this public platform. So that's when we decided to launch our own platform. And in February, we launched it in the US and in a couple of other international markets. And then in July, we launched it in India. So it's now been 3 full months in India. And that's the story. That's been the story so far.
So I understand that when it comes to video, the monthly MAUs, the monthly average user is close to 600 million. For radio, it's about 300 million, if I'm not mistaken. And you've gone on record to say that there's no reason as to why it can't catch up to what we see for video, right?
Yeah,
for radio.
So let me just get those numbers right. So yes, the video MAUs would be anywhere between 500 and 600 million in this country, probably more, right? And YouTube alone is just 500 million. But if you take music OTTs, right, which is the biggest audio piece that is there on the OTT side, they probably get 300 million, right, which is half of video. So first, the 300 million has no reason not to go to 600 million.
Right.
And two is, but if you look at non-music audio, which is basically podcasts and those kind of things, those are not even at 15 or 20 million. So the way we look at it, we have entered a market which is at 15 or 20 million strong size today, but that 15-20 million can easily go to 200 million, 300 million, and in a 5 years time, there's no reason why that should not go to 600-700 million. So the way we now say it is that for Mirchi, the TAM, as they call it, the total addressable market, is 1 billion people. While for Radio Mirchi, it was just 200 million people, which is the current consumers of all radio stations.
So, you were talking about podcasts and things. So I just wanted to understand, for just the FM radio Mirchi business, isn't there that sense of competition now with so many other options coming up for listenership?
Things
Are you
have
worried?
changed. Well, I would be, obviously not be honest if I say that I don't worry. Remember, FM radio at the end of the day is a protected business. There are just a handful of players in each city, and therefore, you're protected. While the internet is an unending ocean, and therefore, there's a lot more of competition. So I'm certainly worried, right? But at the end of the day, when you think about it, you have to also look at the opportunities that the medium presents. And I just mentioned that in radio, maybe you're talking to 200 million people. But when you enter digital, you're talking straight away to 1 billion people. So you've got 5x the audience to address. And if there are 10x the number of competitors who are there in the market, if you are good in what you do, and I think over 21 years, Mirchi has shown that, as a brand, it's a youth brand, it's a brand of entertainment, it's generally a very cheerful brand, it makes you feel happy.
Yeah.
We have made audio, we've made video, we've got text entertainment, we've got a whole lot of stuff going on for the last 20 years. I think that there is a good reason we have to believe that we can succeed in this business. So while I'm worried, I'm not overtly worried. I know that I'm ready for the long haul, is what I would say.
Okay. And when it comes to the FM radio policy that was announced initially, I think they did a lot, or they tried to do a lot to help the ailing radio sector. Do you think enough has been done, and what's the appeal from the industry and from players like you?
Well, I think what they've done is certainly very good. So this is clearly something that the government should have done, and they've done it. Because what they've done, and two specific moves over here, right? One is allowing restructuring of radio businesses,
yes,
right? And two is that removing the national cap that exists for a single operator. Both of those should basically facilitate mergers and acquisitions. And today when we have 35 radio stations, radio operators in this country, imagine 35 radio operators in this country, it's an unviable proposition, right? I mean, there needs to be some degree of consolidation in the radio business. With these two moves that the government has introduced, certainly mergers and acquisitions should at least theoretically become possible.
Right.
I wish they had done this 5 years ago.
Okay.
Because 5 years ago, the market was far more ripe for this kind of a deal to happen. And look at our own case. We were trying to acquire, it's public knowledge, so I'll tell you this, but we were trying to acquire what is called Ishq FM, the 3 radio stations which belong to TV Today. But because TV Today is basically a TV company which houses the radio business in the TV company, they were not able to sell the radio business to us. We were willing to buy, they were willing to sell. We had a strike price, we had applied to the government, but the rules just did not allow it. Had this happened 5 years ago, we would have done that, and maybe TV Today would have been better off, we would have been better off.
Now that it's done, what are you looking to acquire? What's on the cards?
So here's the thing. So a lot has changed, like I told you, right? If they had done this 5 years ago, a lot would have happened. In the last 5 years, the pandemic has hit. In the last 5 years, in the last 2 years, radio stations have taken a big hit on their chin. So this is the time for them to stabilize operations.
Okay.
So I would imagine that, at least for the next couple of years, radio broadcasters will look and see how the market is changing. Is it going back to pre-pandemic levels? Is it growing from that point on? And
but is there anything specifically that ENIL is eyeing at the moment?
Well, see, ENIL has another couple of restrictions. One is that, remember, despite these reforms, there is another reform that the government has not done yet. And which is that, there is still a city level cap.
Okay.
In other words, in the smaller cities, I can only operate one radio station. So if I'm going to acquire a large network, and if that network also has a city in a smaller, an operation in a smaller city, I have to shed one of those 2 stations, right? So it's not very easy to do mergers and acquisition even today, even though the pathway has been cleared.
Right.
But there's also another thing, that Mirchi is now focusing a lot more on its digital avatar, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we would like to keep our investments in the future more towards the digital side and less on FM radio. So I myself personally would say this, that we will keep looking out for opportunities on mergers and acquisitions, but I don't see it as a big piece of our future strategy.
Okay. And, when it comes to the, what you guys had bid for in the radio auctions, you said that there was the phase 1 and phase 2, batch 1 and batch 2.
Yes.
What's happening on that front now? What is next on the cards?
Well, the government had a very bad experience with batch 2. And the reason for that was that their policy on reserve fees, the starting point of any auction, the reserve fees were so high that nobody could participate, right? So batch 2 failed. Hardly 25% of the frequencies which were offered were actually taken up. 75% failed. So the government has taken its time to, get its mind around this, come up with some solution. They've made some internal discussions. They've now come back, they're now talking to us. They're coming back with the policy which says that let's liberalize the frequency. So it's not an FM frequency longer, it's a frequency. And on that frequency, you can run your FM station, but you can also run digital transmission. So imagine if on my 98.3, today I'm running one FM radio station, and imagine the future on my 98.3, I could run my 98.3 and I could run 3 more or 4 more stations in parallel on DRM or DAB or one of those technologies. Then basically the content supply in the market could certainly shoot up. So the government is considering that, and I think at some point in time they will come out with a policy where they will announce this, and then they will announce a 3rd batch auctions. But we'll have to wait and see, the fine print in the policy, and then we'll decide whether we are participating or not.
Let's now talk about your financials in terms of where you see your EBITDA margins headed. Given that you did speak about ad revenue growth still taking time to pick up to go back to those pre-COVID levels, what's the outlook in terms of operational performance for ENIL?
So one of the really good things that happened to us during the COVID period of time is that we were forced to become slim.
Yeah.
Or to slim down.
Cost controls, and you guys have been looking at a lot of
Absolutely.
cost efficiency.
And let me give you a dimension of that, right? So let's say my operating costs were 300 crores in a year, rupees in a year. We brought it down to 200 crores. We shaved off 100 crores from our annual operating costs. That's like a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
Now remember also, I just mentioned to you that the revenues will not climb back to pre-COVID levels until next year.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter, because even with lesser revenues, because my costs are actually far lower, I can still deliver a better EBITDA. So I'm far more optimistic about EBITDA recovery happening maybe in FY23 itself, even if revenue recovery happens in FY24.
Okay.
So I think we are very bullish on the bottom line side.
Okay. And you were talking about the solutions business and the radio business. So what is going to be the overall performance? When are you seeing a pickup? Have things stabilized here?
So the solution business is a very strong business, because it actually says that let's put the client in the middle, right? And ask the client what their problems are and find a solution to it. So it's a very strong product. But within solutions, there are a couple of products that we have, like concerts or like activations on ground, right? Those were not happening for 2 years because of the lockdowns and no permissions being forthcoming. Those permissions are now starting to come, and those are actually again coming back into our portfolio. And I think therefore that the solution business will stage a very smart recovery in the next 12 months and in the next 24 months.
What kind of growth, like a double digit?
Normally, since I mentioned to you that I expect that my 1/3 share of solutions will grow to 1/2 in 2 years' time. So that should tell you that the solution business will grow far faster than the radio business. I mean, I think that the solution business can grow at 25-27% CAGR for the next 3 years.
Okay. International business as well, what's the overall revenue pie? Which are some of the countries that you guys are present in? How are you looking at growing your digital presence there?
So international markets, basically our strategy is very simple. We are tracking Indian audiences.
Yeah.
And wherever you have people of Indian origin living, and wherever the market opportunity exists, we enter that country. So the country that we entered the first, of course, was the US. Actually, we entered the UAE about 9-10 years ago.
Yeah.
But that was a brand licensing agreement. In other words, we gave them the brand to use, and we then allowed them to use, and they gave us a certain fee to use. But we didn't run the operation ourselves. The first country where we actually entered and ran the operation ourselves was in New Jersey in the US. That was in 2019, right? Before the COVID and all that. And our experience in New Jersey has been very, very good. We have made profits over there, and we look at that business growing. But expansion in international markets depends also on the availability of the frequency.
Right.
So since 2019, we have expanded into Dallas, we have expanded into San Francisco in the US, and we've also expanded into Bahrain, and we've also expanded into Qatar. And in the meantime, the operation that we had with Abu Dhabi, now that has transformed, and we've now got an operation in Dubai.
Okay.
So today we are present in Dubai, we are present in Qatar, we are present in Bahrain, and we are present in the United States. Now that's the terrestrial radio part, which depends on frequencies being available. But the beauty with Mirchi Plus is that it doesn't need any licenses, and wherever you want to launch, you can launch. So
and the international launch of Mirchi Plus was first in overseas,
That's right.
Yeah.
So the international launch happened first in the US, and look at the product innovation in the US. In the US, let's say you've moved from Chandigarh and you've migrated to the US somewhere, and you feel like staying in touch with Chandigarh. Well, Mirchi Chandigarh station is available in the US on the app.
Got it.
Right? And it's time shifted, so you're not listening to a stale product. You're actually listening to a product time shifted to suit your time requirement.
Got it. Oh, wow.
So yes, you're right. So the Mirchi Plus is now the new tool for our international expansion, and we'll be emphasizing lesser and lesser on terrestrial expansion and more on Mirchi Plus.
So as of now, 63 stations, 73 cities. What's the game plan in order to expand further for ENIL?
Well, honestly, I don't think that we will expand this physical network all that much.
Okay.
Sure, there are some gaps in our network. And if there are opportunities available through M&A, we may try and acquire. But our bigger expansion is going to be in the form of the Mirchi Plus app.
Yeah.
And maybe today we are reaching under 1 million monthly users.
Yeah.
But that's just in the first 2 or 3 months. I think that the market opportunity is 1 billion Indians.
Yes.
And if nothing, we should definitely try and go to at least 200 odd million users in either the video product or on the Mirchi app or on Facebook or on YouTube, wherever, all put together, the digital footprint of Mirchi should become 250 million in the next 3 or 4 years' time. That's the immediate milestone that we've got.
That's the target on the cards. And you were talking about that ad revenue thing. I just want to get back to it because for the industry as a whole, we have seen that recovery kicking in about 14% from Jan to the month of May 2022. So for you, when are you seeing an incremental pickup in ad revenue growth, and what is it that you guys are looking at by way of numbers?
The advertising in the radio business has shot up far faster than this actually, because don't forget that we're also fallen a lot more, right? So from a much lower base, obviously the recovery is faster. So our recovery has been far faster. Between January and May, I mean, I don't know the exact numbers often, but if you see our numbers, I mean, at least on a year-on-year basis, we've been growing at more than 100%. And so that is on a base effect, right?
Yeah.
But revenues will go back to pre-pandemic levels next year. But advertising volumes have already gone back, which means that the number of advertisers who are advertising, the amount of money, the amount of secondage they're putting on the channels, that has already gone up. Pricing took a beating during the COVID days. So price recovery may take a couple of years longer. So it's a bit of a mix of fortunes. Volumes are doing great. Pricing is still down. I think the combined product, which is the revenues, will take until FY23 or FY24 to completely recover.
Got it. Prashant, just to get back to digital, because it is an expensive proposition, but I understand that the company doesn't want to go very aggressive. I read somewhere that the plan is not to be a unicorn, but to be a camel in terms of the, advertising and marketing spends. So what's the strategy on spending while reining in your costs?
Well, let me tell you that in the last 4 or 5 months, as the funding freeze, as they call it, has happened in the digital business, I think the theory that we have been working on has actually been proven to be very prescient, right? Because what is it that we're saying? We're saying that in a consumer business, right, it's very easy to buy your MAUs, right? You spend money on performance marketing and you can get a lot of users to come to your app. But it's a temporary phenomenon because they don't like your product or something, they go back, then you spend again and try and get a fresh bunch of people to come and try your app, and then they go back again. So it's a never kind of a situation, exceedingly expensive. It doesn't help the business at all, and it doesn't get you your loyal users.
Right.
Now, what we have said is that we, on the other hand, will depend heavily on the quality of our app, which is the user experience, the quality of the content, which is what our strength has been in 20 years, right? And we will pull in users organically, meaning people will come by word of mouth. Somebody talks about the story to somebody else, and then that other person comes, and that's how the usership actually picks up. Now, this is slow, but it's more sustainable. And that's why it's called the camel strategy, because it's not like running at the speed of a unicorn, which is useless, but it's at least far more sustainable and reliable. And think of it like this, for a company like ENIL, which has so much money on its books, right? We've got 200 crore rupees of cash in our books. We should be generating 100 crores of cash every year. And what is it that any digital platform requires? It requires proper funding, right? So when we do it in this manner, we are able to ensure for many years, and that's why I mentioned to you, it's a long haul game. We will continue to fund Mirchi Plus, and we will continue to invest in content and take it forward.
So what are you going to do with that cash on books right now? These are the plans, right, that you have slated going forward? Okay, fine. Now,
there's one more thing I would like to add, Avansi, in terms of what we do with the cash. See, remember, digital strategy is not all inside of ENIL. A large number of things that we are interested in doing, it's best done on the outside. So there are, individual promoters outside, there are businesses outside, there are startups outside in the areas that we are interested in, right? We will certainly deploy some of our cash in strategic investments in some of these startups outside, but very close to the Mirchi business, very close to the Mirchi brand.
Okay. And you were discussing at the start when I came in that you guys had started out in 2001, was it? And look what a long way you've come and how the business has grown and sustained. So what's going to be the next milestone?
Well, I think the next milestone will have to come from the digital side. I think Mirchi Plus, for Mirchi Plus, every milestone. What's
the current contribution of it to your overall revenue pie?
Well, Mirchi Plus, we're not
just digital.
Digital contributes out of 100% revenues. Digital contributes about 10%.
And then you plan to go up to about 25%.
That's right. So this 10% will go up to 25%, hopefully in the next 2 or 3 years. But right now, as we speak, Mirchi Plus is not open to advertising because we are building the product and we are offering great content right now. So that's the plan.
And when will it be open to?
Hopefully either at the beginning of the next calendar year or at the beginning of the next financial year. And we want enough quantity of work of good creative content to be on the app before we open it up for advertising in India and subscriptions abroad.
Okay. Well, what an interesting journey it's been. Thank you so much for having me here in your office. It's been a pleasure, Prashant, interacting
And like
with
you said, we will now meet here more often.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys, for watching.